But it was great. The propaganda was written by a guy with a pen name called Montius. And he was, like I said, a disgruntled Spanish monk who became Lutheran, who's fled to the Netherlands, and using the lovely invention of the printing press to kind of spread these things around. And looking at the various things that happened, people were saying that, oh, these people are so unenlightened, they're so horrible. But then we look at the documents, and it's like people reading them who were skeptical said that these were more enlightened than people in the Enlightenment. Because believe it or not, many of the people who were like Enlightenment figures, like Hobbes and them, were actually in witch trials, being the judges, or like, you know, witches should die in the most horrible, painful fashion possible. It was like, you're enlightened? Really? And just because I'm on the witch thing, because that was part of it. In Spain, let me jump ahead a little bit because this is actually one of the more fascinating things. Amongst many, many, many others. Okay. The inflated numbers of witches. People said that it was, let's see here, 9 million witches were killed, as they said. It was not 9 million. It was actually, in 3 centuries, was less than 1,000 people. 12 of which was in Spain. Anyway, see, there's, wow, 9 million, less than 1,000. So we look at all these things, it's like, really? Really? And to even kind of bring it to a greater point, in this time period, middle of the 13th century on up to even to the 1700s, there were witch trials. But in Spain, there was very little, if any, if almost gone, because of 1 or 2 events. And you'll figure out where the deaths came from. There was a group in one part of Spain, basically had started a witch hunt, got 12 witches, yay, burn them all. And the local person, so it's basically kind of like an underling of the Inquisition was there, he got caught up in it, like, oh yeah, we're witches. The High Council, the Suprema, in the capital got word of this, like, what are you doing? Came down. Let's just say they were not happy. So this is what happened. All these people these 4 women were like, oh, these are all witches. Lovely friend of the Inquisition, Don Francisco, lovely Francisco. He came to investigate and see what was going on. When he got there, he removed the guy who's in charge of the local Inquisition. He was dealt with. He got sent back. You got to deal with the other guys. All the people were released who were still living, unfortunately. Immediately, he told them, you have to give them back anything that you confiscated and pay reparations to the families in which those you have victimized. He also dismissed every charge that was committed, even to those who have died, through their names. Also, in his report, he told them, and I quote, it was laughable, the evidence that they had. And that with Francisco's report to the Suprema, and then following this event that happened, they said that, this is silly. Basically, they said it was stupid. It's laughable, it's stupid. And the tables turned. In Spain, all agreed with his report. They read it. It's like, yeah, we understand. People agree. So it changed to be not looking for witches, but looking for witch hunters. So those who are running around accusing people of being witches were put on trial, not people who were being accused of witches. So it was like, we don't like you doing this. Because the people you accuse are typically people who are practicing folk medicine or just like a local superstition, which is like, don't do superstition, Miss, Gomez or whatever your name is, in Spain, because that seems like, oh, I didn't know that. So I'll know it again. This should go to question good. And that's it. Because they wrote later on as saying, this is the most ridiculous thing. Because in Spain, there was a slight difference in the inquisitors, because there were Dominicans and Franciscans, but they're also university lawyers. And they were more, as all inquisitors were trained in law, but these were like lay lawyers. They weren't priests or monks necessarily, and they were very much, okay, this is a jump start for my career. And so you have somebody who's very much in that mentality, right? What do you do when someone says, that lady killed all these babies, she's a witch? Okay, you say she killed all these babies, can you please show me the dead babies? They disappeared with the magic. Go away or I'm going to hurt you. Okay, so I mean, it was like that. You had to look at, it was like, it's evidence-based. You have, especially when it comes to this, you can't just have witnesses, you have to have a physical evidence sometimes. Dead people, where are the bodies? Magic, they can't be your answer to everything. So we see this, like the biggest example with witches, this happening, the Spanish Inquisition was like, and to the point where they literally no longer would even accept things for it, and they said it was just people being superstitious. So the people who were killed were usually were the civil authorities, were mobs, and then the Inquisition went after the mobs. So that one got blown out of the water. That big myth there. Also, what we need to look at is those who were, well, first, again, I said this once, but I need to say it again, but the Inquisition only had authority over Christians. Only Christians. Like church law now. We're only looking at Catholics. We're only looking at Christians. We can't have authority over people who aren't, in our jurisdiction. I mean, that's a logical thing. So the idea that they persecuted Jews and Muslims is out of question, one thing. Now, we do remember in Spain that in 1492, not only did Columbus sail the ocean blue, that we had the expulsion of Jews and Muslims of Spain. Now, the Jewish people, they were like, Muslims, problem because they kept having a tendency to come and keep conquering us. So they were like, y'all go away. We don't want you here. But then the thing came up about those who had converted to Christianity, and people started to point fingers. You are not really Christian. You are a person who is a Christian in name only and still a practicing Jew. And oddly enough, the people who were saying this was Jewish people. It didn't work out well, as we saw in 1492, because it just got a little bit much. But many people, including people who we call old Christians, meaning that those who, family's always been Christian, were saying, well, yeah, these people, you don't like them, and they're just practicing Christianity outside and, actually Jewish or still Muslim. That vastly was not the case. People who did become Christian, obviously from their former religious communities would be very angry and upset, especially with Muslims, because we know if you defect from the faith, kill them. Yeah, it's in the Quran. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. But we're not talking about that today. People were upset and were going after them, not necessarily literally with pitchforks and what have you, but a lot of the older Christians like, yeah, you may be crypto Jews or Muslims. Let's put them on trial. The vast majority, like, absolutely not. They became, legitimately, they wanted to become Christians. And how do we know this? Well, bishops were born of these families. Philip II's grandmama, we're going to have to ship grandma away because she was a Jew. It's like, so even into the royal family, they had people who could convert to Christianity. His grandmother was Jewish and became a Christian. So, as you can imagine, the crown was a little bit perturbed. What are you talking about my grandma? It's kind of that mentality. And eventually, over time, like I said, it got so bad amongst the peoples themselves that the reason the Inquisition stepped in was to prevent people from killing each other. It's like, look, okay, we'll look at it. We'll see. He's really a Christian. Leave him alone. He's really, really a Christian. He's no longer a Muslim. Leave him alone. And this went on, and then eventually got really bad civilly because riots and stuff. People's passions get riled up, and there's always a riot. There's always a mob. And so eventually people began to be expelled. And so at this point, we had then the horrible, unfortunate event of everybody being expelled back, not back to, but some just away because Jewish culture in Spain was actually flourishing. They had a renaissance, relearning Hebrew, Hebrew poetry, various things. But at the same time, there were not some nice people too. Maimonides, who was one of the great philosophers in Jewish literature, wonderful guy. I love his work. He's a great guy. You also, when you learn details, it's like, oh, never learn about your heroes because it really messes things up for you. Because Maimonides was one of those who were accusing his fellow, people who would have become Christian from being Jews. He's like, they should be executed. This is Maimonides, an enlightened philosopher, one of the greatest Jewish philosophers that ever lived, arguably. And he's like, you should die because you became Christian. So we had this, history is more complicated than we make it out to be. So, as I was saying, with all the stuff, we look at people, okay, not just those who became Christian from either Jewish or Muslim faith, but then we now have to deal with those who were Protestants, which they called everybody Lutheran. It didn't matter what you were. They didn't say Protestant, they just called you, I'm going to mutilate this horrible word, this word in Spanish. Lutheranos, yeah, everybody was a Lutheran. So if you're a Protestant, you're a Lutheran. But they were, and basically didn't really much happen in Spain. We're looking just at Spain at this point. Because the Spanish already had a Reformation within the Catholic Church there. And so people were less likely actually to fall into Protestantism in general. And so there were very few people, and it wasn't like Miss Suzanne who lived down the corner. She's done become a Lutheran. Y'all got to get her and burn her. It was usually a overly zealous priest or monk. Very rarely was it ever just a regular person on the street. And, they were tried, and 9 times out of 10, again, they were not executed. But at the same time, many of the same laws that the tribunals would look at were also civil laws at the same time. So let's give an example of civil law. In wonderful, wonderful English, because I know a lot more about English history than anything, they were pretty sadistic too. They had nothing on the Germans on it. In England, if you stole a sheep or a livestock, you were disemboweled. That's the punishment. There were like lovely punishments for taking, for stealing. Things were chopped off. Things were flayed. People were boiled. Wonderful, wonderful, interesting punishments. For crushing like the grass, in a garden, you're just going to have to lose your hands. What? That's the law. You got to. I'm sorry. I'm just doing my job. Next. It's like, what? No. So you had all these, people were looking at the Inquisition. Here's what I'm trying to get to is they're looking at it and saying, oh, this horrible things happened. Have you looked at the time period? Look at all the countries and their civil laws. If you do something and people are like, oh, these people, because they did some things they ought not to do with other people of the same sex. Kill them all! The church was like, what? No, but the civil law said you had to be put to death. Granted, that one specifically was not exactly put into often because it was one of those that were just never enforced a lot. You're a witch. Let's look at the evidence. No, let's burn her. Evidence, burn her. Evidence, burn her. So that's what it was. Church, what's the evidence? How can we look at this? Civil authority, burn them. I'd like a priest, please. It's like, and it wasn't just Catholics who, were getting mobs together and burning and dealing with all these people. Protestants is the same thing. Everybody knows that in the wars and all that, Protestants were, I wouldn't say just as bad, but they were getting pretty bad, they were pretty bad themselves. And it wasn't just Catholic on Protestant violence or Protestant on Catholic violence. It was Protestant on Protestant violence. And the Baptists should burn and hang and be flayed alive. What? The Swiss, you think we're being very nice people, but not so much. So you would have these people who were in various countries at various times, and being inflicted with these horrible, 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 horrible things for petty things. You know, now we look at them as like I said, you look at this time period and you're like, these people are insane. They have a tremendous bloodlust and want just to kill everybody that did anything. They look at you the wrong way. Plug his eye out. It's like, what? You just smack him. Don't punch it. Don't pull his eyeball out, you know? But this is that time period where leaders were absolute. It was an absolute monarchy, an absolute emperor, or the guy in his village who was top dog was the top dog, and he's like, so-and-so's a witch, burn her! You know, there it went. But when the Inquisition was in place, its purpose was to prevent this from happening. That's why it was Inquisition. To inquire, to look, to see, to make sure that people aren't getting carried away with themselves. And I think we may be running out of time now. Yep, so basically, don't judge history without looking at the context and don't impose views on us today to those in the past, because it will be done to us in the future. But also, make sure you look at the sources, because all the files we looked at to the Inquisition were the files. Had no reason to lie because they were done in secret. We're all very much banal, bland, and boring. No, but that very few people tortured, very few people executed. It's mostly like, Mrs. Susie Ann said this. Mrs. Susie Ann repented. Mrs. Susie Ann, I can't say went to confession, but did go to confession. Did. I mean, it was that boring. It's very bad. I mean, and so we see all these researchers now coming to light of all these things. And that's how we need to remember to look at history, not by those who publish certain things at the time. If we did that, we would have to look at maybe, I was like, oh, well, what were the Jews like in the 18th and the 20th century? These German folks really see all these really weird stuff about them, or Austrians rather. All this propaganda stuff. They must have been terrible, horrible people. 1,000 years later, oh, wait a minute. You know, we have to look at it in this context. And I don't mean to go into hyperbole with that, but just to kind of give the most extreme possible look. But have to judge history for what it is. Let's go.
Close with a prayer.
Sure. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord God of all history and time, we ask you to continue to enlighten us in our minds and our hearts, that we will have a hunger and thirst for truth in history and knowledge, which is truly seeking you in all things. We ask that you send your Holy Spirit from on high, dwell within us, so we'll always have a thirst to learn more, not only about you specifically, but all the things that have to do with your people. We thank you for this time for being together and the ability to learn and to renew our understanding of all things. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning,